Welcome to the Word for Life podcast, a daily devotional covering the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelation.
In the last chapter of Exodus, we saw that the glory cloud of God had covered the tabernacle. Now, in Leviticus chapter 1, the Lord spoke from the cloud to Moses. And in the first few chapters of Leviticus, God gave instructions about the offerings that Israel can bring to the Lord. You see, these offerings will help Israel to come to God and have fellowship with Him. Also, notice in this chapter how God provides clear information about what kind of offerings He would accept and how they must be offered. Friends, our God clearly communicates. Israel did not need to guess what to do or what to offer to please the Lord. Unlike their Canaanite neighbors, they do not need to do trial and error with God and figure out by themselves what would be the appropriate sacrifices. Israel was clearly told what the Lord would accept. All they needed to do was to bring that offering as the Lord specified and offer it in the way God expected. Then they can be sure that the Lord will accept. So now in chapter 1, God talks about the burnt offering. First, we read that Israel could bring an animal from the herd, or an animal from the flock, or even a bird. This means those who cannot afford a bull or a sheep can also come to the Lord. They can bring a pigeon. You see, pigeons were small birds which could just be caught in the fields and got without paying a price. So this means even the poor among Israel could also bring an offering to the Lord. So again we see that God made a provision for everyone in Israel to come to have a fellowship with Him. But friends, this does not mean that they can be careless before a holy God or take Him for granted. God says in this chapter that the worshipper must follow a certain procedure. Firstly, the animal they bring must be without defect, and the worshipper must lay his hands on the animal, slaughter the animal, and then give it to the priest. Then the priest also must follow a procedure. He must take the blood of the animal and splash it on all the sides of the altar. And then the animal needs to be washed with water and every impurity taken away. Finally, the whole animal will be burnt on the altar. If the worshipper carefully follows all these procedures and honors the Lord, then the sacrifice will be a pleasing aroma to the Lord. Friends, all the offerings in the Old Testament had symbolic and spiritual meanings. So when we read all these sacrifices in the Old Testament, we need to ask, what could be the symbolic and spiritual meaning of this? The New Testament writers like Paul and Peter have brought out the spiritual meanings of these Old Testament sacrifices in their letters. So, let us consider few of the spiritual meanings. Number 1. Like the sacrifice was burnt entirely on the altar, God today wants His people to fully give themselves to Him. Friends, holiness and consecrated life cannot be partial. Believers cannot be consecrated in one area of their lives and not be committed in another area of their lives. That is why Paul told the Roman church that they need to give their lives as a living sacrifice to the Lord. And also, like the sacrifice was washed before it was sacrificed, believers today cleanse themselves before God in order to be used by Him. Finally, believers live their lives in such a way that they are a pleasing aroma to the Lord.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you tomorrow for the next episode of the Word for Life podcast.